We're good.
Okay, we're good. The meeting of the Human Rights Commission of the Town of Mansfield is now called to order, and let us do the roll call. I'd like everyone just to say their name, and Monica, you take note of who's here, please. Thank you. Jane Freed presiding for the moment. Karen, you want to go ahead?
Sure, Karen Lepick.
Heather Evans,
Amy Nocton.
Virginia, you want to say your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Virginia. Lorenz.
Thank you. Katie, did you say yours?
Katie Bell, Youth Services, and we have another Youth Services joiner tonight.
Thank you. Will you please introduce yourself, Elizabeth?
Hi, Elizabeth Champlin.
Okay, you are a student at Yale. Wonderful. And Derek is with us again. And that's wonderful. Have we missed anybody who's not here?
Felicia will not be joining us tonight. Barbara will not be joining us, and Zamara will not be here.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, then let's begin. I'm going to call for approval of the minutes from the last meeting, please. Will somebody so move?
There's actually one small typo in the, I think, in member reports. It's NEAG, right? With a G. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
thank you.
Okay, got it, Monica?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, is there anything else that anybody wants to comment on about the minutes? Okay, thank you. Will somebody please move for approval of the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Amy Nocton. Second, Karen. Okay. Moving right along, member reports. This is kind of the check-in time where everybody says what they've been doing for the good of humanity lately. So why don't you just raise your hand or do that little hand raising icon if you want to talk, because your screen doesn't look like my screen. What has everybody been doing to make the world better?
We had our table at the street fair, at the, what do you call it? The Mansfield Town Fair. Thanks to Jean and Virginia and Barbara, and Felicia helped me out beforehand. And then of course, Margaret was awesome. And we had kind of a low interest profile. So we talked about ways of maybe capturing younger people's attention, maybe making a game or giving away stuff, because obviously the rest of the town booths really didn't heed that low environmental impact plea, I guess. So it was nice. It was a nice day. But yeah, we met some interesting people because we had our map up. But I didn't feel like we were making a huge impact in the world.
Yeah, I had that same impression, but I did talk to a few. I just went out and grabbed people. I was doing my on the Midway approach, where I just went and talked to people. I talked to a guy who's lived here for 15 years, who's a Sikh, talked to 2 Chinese students, talked to a couple of Black students, and then random other people who came by, but it was very low key. And I think we need to make more noise. I agree with Karen.
I did have one of my former students who's a Yukon student. She's from the Karen tribe in Burma, Myanmar, and grew up in a Thai refugee camp. And she was kind of blown away that we have a human rights organization in town, and she was really helpful. So that was kind of nice.
That's good. We, Barbara and I were talking about the fact that we need to just have some open come and talk to us conversations that we advertise to people and do like what we're doing right now, because we need more input from people about what issues they think are important. And the fair was nice, but it wasn't as effective as we wanted it to be. So we need to do more reaching out stuff. Okay, anybody else? What have you been doing in the domain of human rights? Katie, go ahead.
So I'm excited to give an update. Since last month, we did, as Youth Services and Human Services, present to Town Council on the 27th of September, a proposal that they move forward with approving memorandums of agreement and understanding between Wellington, Ashford, and Mansfield to create a restorative justice-based juvenile diversion program. And Town Council did approve the drafting of those MOUs and MOAs between towns. So at this point, all three towns have agreed, yes, this is important. Yes, we are going to dedicate our Youth Service Bureau efforts, time, energy, money towards a joint regional approach to youth diversion, in order to approach equity, in order to keep kids from school to prison pipeline, and to start to build a program that is a long time coming. And so now we are in kind of the next steps of that, which is very exciting after it being a project in the works for a while, that folks are now behind, and there's a lot of support for it. And so we are excited to keep along with those next steps to hopefully have something up and running. My goal is before or on January, because then we get 6 months of runtime in to make us eligible for more grant funding in the next grant cycle.
Hey, Katie, how long have you guys been how long has there been a Youth Service Bureau in Mansfield?
Like a million years. I think it started in the 70s. That's when youth service bureaus started to really take hold in Connecticut. So I am, as far as I know, the third youth services supervisor for the town of Mansfield. So my predecessor, Pat Michaelak, was in that position for a really long time, and her predecessor, Janet Romeko, I believe was the original youth service bureau director for the town of Mansfield. So it's been in place for over 2 decades. I couldn't tell you exactly when it was chartered and established, but it's been around a while, and it's gone through a lot of changes, and we're excited for the changes that were in progress now.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Katie, I want to ask you, I understand that True Colors went out of business. Is that correct?
So True Colors, back
It is a
in,
Youth Service Bureau for gay and lesbian and sexual people.
so True Colors actually is not a youth service bureau. True Colors is a nonprofit organization that for a long time has been the state contracted agency for DCF's work specifically with LGBTQIA+ youth, including their mentoring program. So during the course of the pandemic, True Colors did look at their financials, and they made the decision not to resume or continue programming for the time being. I believe they still exist as a 501(c)(3) or 401(b). They exist as some sort of charitable organization still. They haven't completely stopped existing, but those contracts have gone to other providers in the state of Connecticut to ensure that there's still programming happening for youth, but it isn't currently going through True Colors. So right now, the biggest organizations that are doing kind of broad Connecticut LGBTQIA+ programming for youth is actually a youth-led organization called Q+. And that is youth-led. It is not even an incorporated like entity, nonprofit, and it is run completely by volunteers, and a lot of the volunteer adults that are participating in helping the youth really organize that are former mentors and former folks who worked with True Colors. So they're helping support those movements for youth by youth, kind of in a volunteer capacity, but coming from an area of expertise. And then a lot of the other LGBTQIA+ organizations across the state have picked up some of the other programmings. Like I believe it is the Pride Center in New Haven, I want to say, that picked up the mentoring program, because it's either them or the Triangle Center, and I don't remember exactly which one, but I think it's the Pride Center out of New Haven who is working on that DCF contract now for the LGBTQIA+ mentoring programs.
Thank you. Just wanted to know. Amy, next, go. Unmute yourself.
I slid the screen over, so I couldn't find the mute button when I wanted to. I wanted to follow up with Kate, with what something that Katie was saying. today at a faculty meeting, they gave a little bit more explanation about a new hire who is a liaison between families and the school and working with at-risk children. Apparently this individual has already made a couple of home visits to be able to give them more directed and more specific resources to make sure that they're getting the information that they need. He is bilingual, Spanish and English. But as you were talking about the restorative justice and this collaboration between the towns now, if you think of it, you might want to reach out to me / this individual, and his name is slipping my mind. I think it's Omar, and I don't remember his last name, but I've only met him once. So at any rate, it might be another resource for you. I'm happy to also say that our GSA is up and running. I know I shared that earlier at another meeting. And we have a really nice group of kids, super excited, very enthusiastic. And in terms of the work that Deliberation and Discourse is doing, and Derek can certainly chime in after this if he should like, we do have tentative dates, which should be published soon, about upcoming forums. Our Lou DeLoretto wanted the first one to be on critical race theory, but we have pushed back since we are not teaching critical race theory in our schools. We are looking at truth and narration and who's telling the stories. We're working on a group of panelists. We're also working on doing, it will be like an encounters instead of a national issues forum guide deliberation. We're working on our speaker series. So I need to touch base with Jane. I know I've been remiss. And then Derek, I'll let Derek talk a little bit about where we stand with our participatory budgeting. We've also already done work in the social studies classrooms. We hit all of the freshman classrooms and we did a narrative 4 event where kids exchanged stories and looked at narrative that way. So, and the feedback we've gotten so far has been very positive. It allowed students to meet one another and to share stories. And then also what they did was they looked at history to then say, well, who's telling the stories in history? So it was a pretty powerful lesson. We're going to be working with our audio shelfies again. So just again, trying to get the community involvement to be talking about self and books. And I'm sure I'm missing some. Oh, our podcast. We've started working on the podcast. I don't know what it is yet, but the 2 interns that we have students who are going to be working on a podcast. So things are up and running and starting to take off. And if Derek's willing, I'll let him fill in a little bit about where the participatory budgeting stuff stands in, because certainly that's working in some, to involve students and working at the community level, grassroots and involvement. So thank you.
Right, it is. So we did add a few additional members this year that obviously, as you might have implied, were not involved at all last year. So now they need to be informed of where the participatory budgeting committee stands or how the process works. So that's essentially the first step that we need to complete now. We actually did not complete the full voting cycle, shall we say, last year. We actually never held an official vote because we were essentially held up by a few proposals that were a bit logistically difficult to resolve. So now we are seeking to either resolve those sorts of logistical difficulties, or people are now considering essentially eliminating those proposals from the ballot. Also, I actually did send out an email. I will note that it was actually completely unsolicited. And by the way, nobody was notified about it. So that actually landed me into some, and I wouldn't say I was like reprimanded for it, but I was notified that I should send out a notification of some sort to the intern facilitating the participatory budgeting committee this year if I were to take any such action again, which obviously I did not do that time. That on several, I suppose, unresolved questions that we had for this year's process, and I actually received a few divergent answers on that. Like for instance, on the idea of presenting the final proposals to the Board of Education, most of the respondents I only received 3 responses, so this is a bit of a limited sample. But most of those respondents said that it depends on what the final proposal is and like what I suppose the variables that are involved with implementing those proposals. So and then also with regard to the seeking, well, to re-examining last year's proposals, I had one person who I believe said that hold on, actually let me pull up the emails now on my screen. I'm not going to share it with you guys. This is just for my personal reference. I remember I had one person who said that we send out the form again and seek new proposals for last year's ballot, because some of the other ones were quite limited in terms of the number of students that they would impact, and some others didn't really fit within the budget constraints, which were quite strict. We had another respondent who suggested that we essentially restart last year's process, at least from the stage at which the form was sent out. So in other words, scrap the proposals that we had last year and replace it. That I obviously did not endorse because, we wouldn't be able to do that within the time constraints that we've set. And then we had another student who said that, who also agreed that we should obtain some new proposals that.
Okay,
possibly.
Derek, we need to keep moving on this. So can you just kind of give us a pithy statement about where you are? Just a little pith.
So in other words, we're still really deciding the fundamentals of what this year's process is going to be and what this year's process is going to be like. I actually do have sort of a preliminary plan for that, but that still needs to be discussed further. But, and also we need to inform the new recruits of where the participatory budgeting committee stands. So that's essentially that's the synopsis of where everything stands.
Thank you. Excellent. Who else has something to say? Anybody out there?
I'll just go back to Amy's point. The new hire's name is Omar Rosario, and it is the name that I have had put into my ear as we are beginning to look at who might be a good fit for the diversion program. So we are recruiting with our superintendents in play and trying to figure out who are going to be our best fits for the board.
Great. Okay, I had a meeting with Kelly Lyman last week, and oh dear, the director of special education for the Mansfield Public Schools, whose name
Shamim Padwa.
Patwa is the part I remembered because it goes.
Shamim.
Thank you. Anyway, they were very supportive of the speaker series that I'm trying to put together, and I need some other people supporting me pretty quickly because we are now getting to the point where we have to start scheduling dates and reserving equipment and that sort of thing. But anyway, Kelly, even though Kelly sadly is retiring, she's very happy about it, but she's probably the only one. Oh, she didn't say yet? Oh, it was in the newspaper. Kelly's retiring, and she's been a tremendous friend to this committee. So anyway, she was also very helpful to me in this conversation. And we're moving along on the session that's going to involve making sure that the town of Mansfield is aware of people with needs for special services. And they're going to round up a number of people through the middle school, and then we'll be looking for some other people. But the whole format of the project has changed a little bit in order to avoid doing stupid things that white people typically do, and that I nearly did, but somebody stopped me. So I'll get to that later. But anyway, the meeting with Kelly was good, and she's on board and is going to be helpful, and I was really appreciative. Anybody else? Other things you've done lately? Did anybody go paint the mural yesterday or Monday, whenever it was? Do you know how well it went? Did they get any painters? We don't know. All right. Yeah, go ahead, Monica.
So, yep, they did get quite a few painters.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah, and we also have, I just got an email from Lynn Stoddard of the Sustainability Committee. And their committee would like to help us in the next one. Sorry.
Okay.
So that's, that's a plus. And yeah, there was a decent turnout for what it was. So
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay. Another thing we didn't mention was the artist came by our booth at the Town of Mansfield celebration, sat there for quite some time and just kind of picked our brains about what we thought ought to be in the mural. So that was very nice to meet her. Okay, let's move along then to old business. Do we have any updates about the survey? We had some real good data analysis last time, but we haven't got our analyst here today. Anybody got any more ideas about the survey?
So I
Monica.
know Glenn just had emailed Pam to see if she could update him a little bit more. So I was thinking he would be able to do that, but since he's not here, I think maybe we just table it for the next one.
We certainly can. Moving right along, you can tell that I really like efficient and rapidly moving meetings. Okay, Mlk Mural Project. We just had the report on that. We did have one successful painting day. And we've got another one scheduled for Yukon next week, I believe. Is there anything else to report? Solicitation of funds is in progress, and the request for funds has been sent out a number of times on Facebook, and there's a little code on it if you want to contribute that way. And there's a number of ways to contribute, but I don't know where we are. The town has to raise $7,500 for this project, and I don't know how much progress we've made in doing that. Does anybody know what the number is? Karen, have you heard anything about that? Monica? No? Okay, well, anyway, people are giving money, and the notification of needing money is out there.
Jane,
All
do
right,
you happen to
anything-
know what town Facebook account has posted it? Just because I can then do reshares on the Facebook pages that I have purview over.
I don't know what town, the core Facebook page has it because Mia keeps putting it out there. So we look there and then you can find it and share it from there.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, new business, Celebrate Mansfield Festival update. Is there anything else to say about the Mansfield Festival? Lots of people went. There were millions of little children. It was very much fun. Anything else? Moving right along. Communications none. Okay, report from the town charge subcommittee. What have you guys been doing? Oh, the silence is overwhelming.
Crickets, yes. I'm trying to remember. I'm gonna look at my notes.
Okay, I'm going to move on to I'm going to take over now because this is my project.
I might
You
I
got
might
something, Eric?
remind
Go ahead.
you of what it was. Yeah, the majority of the meeting was dedicated to presenting the list that Felicia and I compiled of resources for I believe it was a page on the town website for Indigenous Peoples Day resources. And
Oh, great,
there were
yes.
some revisions suggested.
And did you do that?
Yes, we did.
And it's up there.
Is it up there, Monica? I looked last week
not sure
and
if it's up there,
I think I looked last week or the week before and I didn't see anything yet.
I thought Margaret had put it up. That was something she was working on. She had told me last week she was working on it early so that it would be up by Indigenous Peoples Day. So hopefully.
I just want to give a total acknowledgement of the fact that COVID has destroyed everybody's mind. We're all exhausted and nobody can keep track of how to tie their shoelaces. So just give yourself a break.
I had
That's
the
where we
same
all
sense.
are. Pardon me, what'd you say, Derek?
Yeah, I've had the same sense throughout the last year and a half, especially throughout the last academic year. I
It's
like
just
missed
awful.
a lot of meetings and events that I typically would not have missed last year. I just lost a lot of ground overall. Yeah,
As did
completely
we, and
scattered.
you're young and healthy and can regenerate. Think about the rest of us.
Yeah.
Okay, I do have one thing that I want to put out here for everybody because I really do need help. We've got this speaker series. Everybody that I talk to, it's called Getting to Know Your Neighbors, and it's down to 4 different groups of issues for the town of Mansfield that's going to happen from mid-January to the end of March on Zoom. And we have one speaker who's going to talk about growing up white. And then after that, we're going to have 4 other groups, and they're going to talk about being a family and raising kids in Mansfield, faith communities in Mansfield. Kelly really wanted to make sure that the middle school perspective got represented, and it had to do with sexual orientation and some other issues about teenage relationships. Haven't framed that one yet. And the last one is going to be about people with special needs in Mansfield. What's it like to live here? And what we're going to try to do is to have every one of those discussions have people from multiple different ethnic groups and groups with different kinds of needs. So then rather than trotting people out and saying, hi, this is what it's like to be a Puerto Rican in Mansfield, which everybody reminded me was very condescending and shouldn't be done. And I knew that, but I forgot. We're going to make sure that everybody's voice gets represented around these themed topics. And my goal is to present 4 different programs in which people get to know how their neighbors experience Mansfield around certain issues. And maybe we'll do 2 for growing up in Mansfield and being a teenager in Mansfield. I don't know, because that seems to be like the big focal point. And then have people who are South Asian people and gay and lesbian people and people who are Muslims and people who are white Christian people, and just all talking to each other about, comparatively speaking, what's your life like? What's it like for you to be here in Mansfield? And my goal as an educator is that we are now about to introduce what we call cognitive complexity. People will realize that it doesn't matter what the topic is. If we have 5 people, they're going to have 5 different experiences, and that they can talk to each other and listen to each other in a civil way and come to understand. So that's where I am right now. And the process will be, there'll be 4 or 5 people in each discussion group and 1 moderator. And so I am looking for people who speak well about their life. And it's going to be partly storytelling and partly information. And would be willing to sit with a panel and a moderator, and we'll give them some questions to talk about so they won't have to just sit there and wonder what to say. And then they'll have about 40 minutes to talk to each other about their own life experience with regard to the issue of the panel. And we will have somebody else taking questions on the chat and feeding them in so that nobody can be disruptive from the audience by just yelling at people or anything. And that'll be it. So we're going to have Growing Up White as the beginning, and then we're going to have 4 different panels. And the one thing I have not managed to integrate yet is, what is it like to live in the farming community in Mansfield? And I may still just do that because we started out with that and it kind of got lost with everything else. But that's where we are right now. And I have been trying, and we have to get some grant money. And I have a guy named Anthony Hobson out looking for money. And he's good at it. So I'm assuming he will. And we're coming up to the deadline and he knows how to do this stuff. So I assume he's going to come up with something. And the Methodist Church on Route 195 is going to provide us with the technology, and Jim Mercurio has been very wonderful about that. So I think the 2 big, huge, we can't do it without this pieces, I think, are taken care of. But I still need people's ideas about how to frame the 3 or 4 discussions that we have. What should the topics be? And then I need participants. So I need you all to give me names or talk to people who you think would like to participate and give them my email, because I am now rounding up people to speak and listen to each other. And that's what I really need. And Amy, I know you know millions of people, but anybody else who knows millions of people, that would be good too. Katie, what do you want to say? Unmute yourself. Thank you.
So you had mentioned specifically in your conversation with Kelly Lyman, the middle school perspective with a focus on what it's like to be LGBTQIA+, and I run the My Pride group, which is a middle school LGBTQIA+ group.
She mentioned you.
It
was only a matter of time till I got to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I do. It's my favorite day of the week. It's great. But I'm curious if there's a way that you've been thinking about how you want that youth voice to be heard and kind of experienced, and if there's a way that, you know, my group might be able to create something, even if they're not there in person, or if you're looking for folks there in person, and how I can kind of use some of those links to share.
I am definitely looking for at least 1 person, maybe 2, to be there, but being minors, we need parental permission and all that sort of stuff. This is why I need to talk to you separately, because it's not like I'm a professor, you know, I am dull. I need things that are a lot more interesting than what I would come up with all by myself. And that's why I need a group of people to talk to. So if you've got students who have good ideas, or you've got good ideas that you've worked out with them, let me know. And I am now functional. I go out and I talk to people in person. I talk to people on Zoom, and we'll just talk until we figure out something, because Kelly was very clear that that was an extremely important issue. And so we
I
figure out
meet
a
with
way
my
to do
group
it.
on Monday and I can ask them if they have any ideas, and maybe
Fantastic. I
they'll,
would love for you to do that, and then just let me know. Or you could, you meet them in person, right?
yeah, we're in person after school.
Because I was going to say you could Zoom me in and I could talk to them too, but you do it and then just let me know what comes out of it. Okay.
They come up with great ideas, and I'm even wondering, like, we have some experience making public service announcements from other grants and other programs. If
Yep.
they wanted to make a little video on what it is to be LGBTQIA plus middle schoolers in Mansfield, and even
Oh,
if they're
please have them do it. We'll run it. It'll be wonderful. I would
not,
love
I'll
it.
check with them. They get to be the boss of their time and tell me how they want to spend it, but I'll float the idea.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Amy, what did you want to say?
I just wanted to let you know too, Jane, that along the same topic, Katie, this is lovely. We're playing off each other nicely this evening. We had a panel yesterday of former E.O. Smith students, current E.O. Smith students, and parents. And there was a gentleman by the name of Rafael Perez Segura. I have his information to contact, who spoke a little bit about growing up queer and Latino in Mansfield. So he's an adult now, he lives in New York City, but he said he'd be happy to continue the conversation in any way and form possible. And since these will be virtual, he could Zoom in from wherever. So just I wanted to make a note, a pithy note that we have. I will send you that link as well.
Thank you, because yes, I want some adults. I think maybe we need to have a whole dialogue but what do we call it? Do we call it sexual orientation? Mia wants to call it living and loving in Mansfield, and I think that's a little too goopy. So that's exactly, how do you decide who you love?
I mean, it's not always necessarily about love when we're also talking about gender identity, and they're paralleled and sometimes intersecting, but they're not.
We need a whole session on this, but I don't know what to call it. So that's where we are right now.
Just call it the alphabet mafia. We'll all know.
Yeah, but it's the people we want to have listen to us. They're the ones that have to know what we're talking about. So give us some thought. Elizabeth, you're shaking your head. That's always dangerous. It's almost like an auction. What do you think? Unmute yourself.
I think also, like you were saying, we know what we're talking about, but how do we portray it to people who need to learn what we know? So trying to get that boundary.
That's really important. So you could give that some thought, please. And if you come up with any ideas, I'll, just email me and we'll talk. Okay.
Yeah. I also know of one other parent in Mansfield who has presented at the Rainbow Center before on what it is to be a parent to a transgender youth, and kind of how that experience is. And I think that is a huge piece of what it means to be growing up in the LGBTQIA plus gender expansive umbrella world, is kind of how are you raising your kiddos who you're trying to figure out how do I decide when to go and push harder on their behalf, and when do I let them kind of take the lead, and kind of finding that balance, especially I think as it relates to gender identity as a huge piece when we're talking about legalities and what names are going on what records and all of those things.
Okay, now what the goal of this program is to get people to know who their neighbors are. So we don't really want a whole bunch of technicalities. I want some information about transgender and how you talk about it, but we also need to have people just talk about their experience, so that somebody who thinks they've never met a transgender person hears what this other person's life is like. So that's going to be the focus, and then we'll have to figure out. Now I'm going to ask you one other question. Can we frame an entire session around issues of what would we call it? Because when I was thinking about adolescence, I was also thinking about throwing in racial differences and ethnic differences and stuff. But this is so huge. I'm not sure we should put in, we'll have people who represent different groups, but I don't think we should focus. We should focus on the issues of sexuality and gender identity from all these different perspectives, I think. It
sounds like maybe Katie's group might have some perspective on that, and maybe it's worth hearing, like, because if the youth are speaking and their parents or their friends are interested in hearing them, and then they invite a friend, then you've got a group, you know, and maybe it's their perspective. And so maybe, I don't know, Katie, maybe maybe you should talk with Jane, and get their perspective, because they might really want to dedicate a day, or maybe not. So
And another piece is not every kiddo in, the My Pride group is necessarily out. And some are there as allies, and some are there as allies because they're questioning and they're not really sure. And so there is a great deal of risk in kind of putting oneself out there. Some folks are pretty open and out, and some are kind of still figuring it out. And so I wonder, if it's worth having an almost combined middle school and high school, what it is to be an LGBTQIA plus youth in Mansfield, and have a middle school perspective and have a high school perspective, rather trying to separate the two out. Because Amy does amazing work with the Gender Sexuality Alliance, and they're incredibly active in doing really cool things. And that can also be a cool way for our middle school kids to see what it's going to be like when they get to EO, and like, oh, here's the next set of things that exist. And, even if it's worth inviting someone from the Rainbow Center to say, like, and then if I go to UConn, here's my other like rainbow community, and look at Mansfield's multi-generational supports for its LGBTQIA plus folks, and how that's maybe changed in years, and how maybe it, is still growing and needs to keep growing.
Okay, I think what I need to do is to find some time where Amy and Katie and I can talk. And pull it together. There's no question in my mind, this has to be a whole session. We can't add anything else. Yes, go ahead, Virginia.
I was thinking maybe we could call the series The Tough Questions. I like that idea, because it definitely invites people with differing opinions to speak.
That's a great idea. Maybe we'll call it that. That's really a good idea, because everybody's got tough questions.
Right.
Yeah. And what do the rest of you think about that? Nod your head.
My question around it would be is if we're using it as a dynamic to ask questions, or if it is more about meeting your neighbor. And I envision asking the tough questions being like you're asking a panel of experts who are going to give you like fact-based knowledge. But if you're trying to encourage connection and community, maybe you're not wanting to frame it as come have a hard conversation, because it's supposed to be inviting, come meet us, come see what we're all about.
My thought was, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
My thought was acknowledging that these questions are difficult might take a little of the pressure off. That's what I was thinking.
Well, you know what we could do? We could weave that into the narrative. Getting to know your neighbors and some of the difficult issues that we're all facing together, something like that, so that we could pull it in, but not make it the headline. And if this works, I thought it was going to cost a fortune, but if it's just people from town and a video system that we have access to, this isn't going to cost much, and we can just do more if we want to. This doesn't have to be the end, but I like the idea of the tough questions thing. And the question is, how do we use it to pull people in rather than scare people? Because I've learned from my own experience that as soon as you say racism, everybody runs away. So I don't want to do that or anything like that. I want to pull people in. But good. I wrote it down, Virginia, so I've got it now in my thinking. All right. So that's where I am with all of that. Other ideas that anybody has?
I'll just I got a pithy idea for this one, and I'll be as pithy as possible.
I think I've introduced a new word. What?
I think, one of the things that we in Mansfield do is we celebrate Mansfield. So what if we did celebrate your neighbors, or celebrate our diverse community, or something where we're playing off the idea of
the second one is the one I like I like that one better. Celebrating our diverse community. That sounds really good.
Because then it's positive. It's like, come meet our diversity, come get to know us as humans, and like be excited about it, as opposed to anything that might put people off, like you said, where you say racism and people go,
All right. Okay, I think we don't have to pick a title yet, but we'll do a little poll of ourselves as we get closer. I need, the one role I haven't filled is somebody who is really good at publicity. Do you have any people in your back pocket who you think would be great? I have one person and I haven't talked to her yet.
I mean,
Oh.
I think tapping, Margaret is going to be
Margaret's
important
one,
piece,
definitely.
yeah. And then, anything that you get to me, I can get to Sarah Dufresne, and Sarah Dufresne knows literally everybody in the world and can get
Who is
anybody to
she?
do anything. She's our early childhood services coordinator. So she runs the community update email that has, I think, over 300 people on the email list.
Okay, yeah, we need people like that.
Yeah, she
Yeah, and
she
then I'm
knows
gonna need
everyone.
somebody with a little bit of an artsy background. Your kids will do this. Because we're gonna need something that looks like a logo that is a visual that we can spread on everything so everybody recognizes it when they see it. And then we have to put the human rights logo on it as well. But we're not there yet. First, the people thing is the big thing right now. Okay, you guys are wonderful. You're better than my regular committee, which hardly ever commits. Literally. All right. Is there anything else anybody would like to say about this or any other subject? We're very excited about having the president here. This is, have you all noticed the weird looking helicopters in the sky? Yeah, they are so strange. They look like they are winged helicopters. And just today we figured maybe this is a president watching over us and maybe getting ready to shoot people. I don't know.
We actually were warned about that today at school because we could hear them circling. They
they're
were
all
practicing
over the
today.
place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that actually happened while I was taking the PSAT today, towards the end of the test.
I hope you have good concentration, Derek. I know you do. Okay, well, Friday's going to be
Yeah, luckily,
exciting.
I only completed the test by then. I was just checking over my answers for the last section, so it didn't impede me too much.
Okay, wait a minute. I have one other announcement because Derek being there reminds me of it. There is another forum sometime in the next week or so, follow up on desegregating Connecticut, and it's a local forum. It's online. So watch for the announcements because we did have one meeting and then UConn caved and decided not to. They withdrew their lawsuit and I don't remember exactly what it was, but anyway, they made it unnecessary for us to fight with them at the moment, but there will be another open forum next week. I want to say the 17th, but I may be wrong. No, that can't be true. It's Sunday. Anyway, there will be an open forum on desegregating Connecticut. And I have been talking to members of the Connecticut NAACP and the New York NAACP to find out how desegregation efforts work in affordable housing and what kind of lawsuits are brought to make it effective. And I'm still working on that. Derek, this is for you too. I'm still working on that because we did find a little bit of information in Derek's work on affordable housing in Mansfield that said it had a civil rights implication because we thought the majority of people who were affected by it were people of color. And Margaret seemed to just jump out of her skin when she heard that. So I am continuing to talk to people slowly and around the edges, but this forum is going on sometime next week. So keep your eyes open. I'm sure you'll see an announcement for it. And it's just a public conversation and more information.
And
Amy,
along
what-
those lines, Jane, if I may, I've shared with all the deliberation discourse students the most recent reports from the surrounding towns, and in those town reports, they give statistics on the number of people who are struggling with affordable housing in the surrounding area. So we have that up on our website, our Canvas site at school, but they were interesting reports to take a look at.
Yeah, and housing insecurity affects different groups of people in different places, depending on who lives there and what kinds of jobs are available. But there's always a civil rights element to it. So just keep your eyes open. And there, let me remind you again, Glenn sent out a link to a statewide meeting of all town human rights commissions coming up in the near future. So if anybody can go to that, I really want to go to that, find out what other people are doing. The way I'm operating, I'll probably forget to get out of bed that day. Who knows? But I think it's really important that we at least know what other people are doing to the degree that we can pay attention. Are there any members of the public? Katie, what would you like to say?
Amy, I was just going to ask you if you could send me that information that you said you have on the Canvas site, because I'm actually helping support the Human Services Advisory Board in tweaking some language in their town charge for slots, and we're kind of looking for what is the best and most inclusive language for slots for individuals who are serving on the board to advocate on behalf of folks who are experiencing housing insecurity or having difficulty connecting to affordable housing, or are generally in a lower SES bracket, and kind of trying to figure out what the best way to say that is so that we can get the right people to the table without it sounding patronizing and like icky. So that sounds like an excellent resource that is going to help me do that thing.
Very good. Okay, anybody else? Final thoughts? Thank you all. It's been wonderful talking to you, and I hope that you have a nice evening. Go Red Sox. What?
Sorry, my internet may have cut out. Amy, can you just remind me as to where you have placed that aforementioned information? Because I have not seen it yet.
When I share it with Katie, I will happily share it with you too.
Okay.
I don't know where exactly the interns have found, have it, so I'd have to look before I can do that, so.
All right, fantastic.
Okay, thank you. All right, let us officially note that the meeting adjourned at 7:47. May I have a motion to that effect? Karen moved that we adjourn, second. Amy second. The meeting is now finished. Have a nice evening.